You're going to hand over those documents, or I will make sure you never see a cent of what your father left behind." That was my brother, standing in the doorway of my childhood home in Oakville, blocking the light, saying those words to me while I was 7 months pregnant and still wearing my hospital ID badge from a 12-hour shift. I didn't answer him. I just looked at him the way you look at someone when you realize, finally, that you never actually knew them at all. Let me go back. Because this story doesn't start with him. It starts with my father's diagnosis, a Tuesday afternoon phone call, and the particular way my mother's voice sounds when she's trying not to cry. My father was diagnosed with early-stage vascular dementia in February. I'm a financial analyst. I work downtown Toronto, I take the GO train, I pack my lunch, I call my parents every Sunday. My brother, I'll call him my brother because that's what he is, biologically, lives 20 minutes from my parents in Oakville and had spent the last 2 years positioning himself as the devoted son. Sunday dinners, driveway shoveling, small visible gestures that my parents interpreted as love, and I now understand were an audit. He was mapping the estate. My father had done well. Not generational wealth, but comfortable, a paid-off house in Oakville worth somewhere north of $1.3 million by current market, a RRSP account, some GIC holdings, and a family trust set up in 2019 that was supposed to split evenly between the two of us when he passed. He'd been clear about that. He'd said it to both of us at the kitchen table with his lawyer present. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that my brother had been spending those Sunday dinners doing more than shoveling driveways. My husband and I found out we were pregnant in October. We weren't trying, exactly, but we weren't not trying either. We were both 31, we had a 2-bedroom condo in Etobicoke, and when the test came back positive, I sat on the bathroom floor and cried in a way that felt like relief. My husband held me and said, Okay, we're doing this. We told my parents at Thanksgiving. My mother cried. My father hugged me for a long time, longer than usual, and when he pulled back, his eyes were wet and he said, "Good, that's good." His disease was already affecting his short-term memory by then. Some days were clear. Some days he thought I was his sister. My brother smiled at dinner and said all the right things. "Congratulations. How far along? Do you know what you want?" I should have noticed that his eyes weren't in it. But I was happy, and happy people are stupid about the people around them. The call came in January. My mother, voice tight, "Your brother brought some papers for Dad to sign." "I don't. I think you should come." I drove out on a Saturday morning. My husband wanted to come, but I told him to stay. I thought it was a misunderstanding, some insurance form or property thing that had confused my mother. I brought coffee. I remember thinking about whether to stop at Tim Hortons or make it at home. My brother was already there when I arrived. He was sitting at the kitchen table with a man I didn't recognize. Mid-50s, leather portfolio, the practiced neutral expression of someone who gets paid to witness things. "What's happening?" I said. "Dad's updating some documents," my brother said. "Just estate planning stuff." My father was in his armchair in the living room. He looked small. He was wearing his good cardigan, the gray one my mother puts on him when company comes. He smiled when he saw me. "There she is," he said, but the way he said it, I wasn't sure in that moment if he knew which one I was. "What documents?" I asked. My brother looked at the man with the portfolio. Something passed between them. "A codicil to the will," my brother said, "and some trust amendments. Dad wants to restructure things a little." "Dad wants to," I said. "Yes." I looked at my father. "Dad, do you know what you're signing today?" He looked at me for a moment. Then he looked at my brother. "She's a smart one," he said, like it was a joke, like we were at a party. I looked at the documents on the table. I'm not a lawyer, but I've spent my career reading financial instruments. The codicil was 2 pages. It amended the trust to redirect 70% of the estate to my brother, citing, and I remember this wording exactly, his consistent and proximate care of the testator during a period of diminished capacity. My father had diminished capacity. That phrase was in the document describing why my father should sign the document. "This isn't happening today," I said. My brother stood up. "It's already been reviewed." "Dad understands what he's signing, does he?" I said. "Not a question. I walked to my father's chair and crouched down next to him. Dad, do you know what's in the papers on the table? He patted my hand. Your mother made coffee, he said. I stood up. I looked at my brother. I said, this man needs to leave, and these documents need to go with him, and we are going to call Dad's actual lawyer before anyone signs anything. My brother's face did something then. The pleasant surface cracked just slightly, like a plate you've dropped but hasn't broken yet. You're being dramatic, he said. You always do this. You come in from the city and you think you know everything. I'm calling Dad's lawyer, I said. Right now. If you do that, my brother said very quietly, I will make sure you regret it. I called anyway. My father's lawyer, the one who'd drafted the original will, was a woman named Ms. Okonkwo. I'm going to use her actual title and last name because she deserves the credit. I called her that Saturday from my parents' driveway while my brother watched me from the window. She answered, which surprised me, and when I described what I was looking at, she was quiet for a moment and then said, do not let anyone sign anything. I'll be there Monday. The man with the portfolio left. My brother left shortly after, but not before he stood in the front hallway and told me, with our mother listening from the kitchen doorway, that I was tearing this family apart, that I was selfish, that I'd always been selfish, living my life in the city, never being there. My mother didn't say anything. That was when I understood that she was afraid of him too. Miss Okonkwo came Monday. She reviewed the documents. She spoke with my father alone, with a capacity assessor she'd brought with her. Then she came downstairs and told us what I had already suspected. My father did not have the legal capacity to amend his estate documents. The assessment was clear. Any changes signed that weekend would have been unenforceable and potentially fraudulent. She also told us something else. The man with the portfolio was not a licensed notary. My brother had brought in someone he'd found, apparently, through a contact, someone willing to serve as a witness without verifying capacity. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was deliberate. She reported it. She had an obligation to, and she did. My brother called me that night 7 times. I didn't answer. My husband sat next to me on the couch and held my hand while my phone lit up on the coffee table, and I just watched it and breathed. What do you want to do? He asked. I don't know yet, I said, but I want to do it right. I want to be honest about what happened inside me over the next few weeks, because I think it matters. I was 7 months pregnant. I was commuting to Toronto 3 days a week. My father was declining. My mother was somewhere between loyalty to her son and horror at what he'd almost done, and she kept calling me and then not saying very much, which was somehow worse than silence, and I was angry. Not the hot kind of angry that makes you do stupid things. The cold kind, the kind that settles in your chest like sediment and just stays there, and you learn to work around it. I kept records. I'm a financial analyst. Record keeping is how I think. I documented every phone call from my brother, every voicemail, every email. I screenshot the text he sent me 3 days after the Monday meeting that said, back off or I'll make sure you lose your maternity benefits fighting this in court. I know what this costs. I saved it. I saved all of it. I also did something that felt strange at the time, but that I now think saved me. I told my husband everything, from the beginning, every detail, every conversation. He'd been patient with my vagueness while I was still processing it, but once I started talking, I couldn't stop. We sat in our kitchen in Etobicoke until 1 in the morning, and I told him about the document, the fake witness, Miss Okonkwo, the phone calls, my mother's silence. He listened. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, okay, what do we need to do? That's who he is. I want you to understand that because it's relevant to the story. I was not handling this alone. I had someone who showed up. Ms. Okonkwo filed a formal complaint with the Law Society regarding the unlicensed witness. She also sent a letter to my brother's home address, on firm letterhead, outlining the legal exposure he faced if he pursued any further attempts to alter my father's estate documents without a proper capacity assessment. He responded by threatening to contest the original trust in court. He sent an email, which he CC'd to me, our mother, and 2 extended family members, which was either a miscalculation or a power move. claiming that the trust had been set up under undue influence from me, that I had manipulated my father during a vulnerable period, and that he intended to pursue legal remedy. I forwarded that email to Ms. Okonkwo within 4 minutes of receiving it. She called me the next morning and said, "And I remember this clearly, he has handed us a significant amount of rope." I asked her what she meant. "The email claims you exerted undue influence in 2019. The trust was drafted by my office. I was present. Your father had full capacity confirmed in writing. Your brother has just made a provably false allegation in a document he distributed to multiple parties. That's defamation." She paused. "I'd like to respond on your behalf, if you'll allow me." I said yes. My daughter was born on a Thursday in late March, in a hospital in Mississauga, in a room where the blinds were half open and the light came in sideways, and my husband held my hand so hard he left marks. She was 6 pounds, 4 ounces. She had my father's forehead. I called my parents from the recovery room. My mother cried. My father asked to see a photo, and when I sent one, he texted back. Slowly, it took him several attempts. "She looks like you when you were small." My brother sent nothing. I came home from the hospital on a Saturday. I was tired in a way that went past tired into something else. Something that felt like being turned inside out and reassembled slightly differently. My husband had stocked the fridge and put a mobile over the bassinet, and left a card on the kitchen counter that said, in his handwriting, "We did it." 3 days later, my brother showed up at my parents' house. My mother called me, whispering. He'd arrived with a woman she didn't recognize and 2 folders of documents, and he was talking about the estate again, about the house, about whether my parents had considered downsizing and who would manage the proceeds. My father was having a bad day. He thought they were there to fix the furnace. I called Ms. Okonkwo. Then I called the non-emergency police line and asked, very calmly, what the procedure was when someone was attempting to financially exploit a person with a documented cognitive impairment. The officer I spoke to told me that if there was an active legal filing protecting the individual and someone was attempting to circumvent it, that could constitute elder financial abuse under Ontario's Substitute Decisions Act. He took a report. Ms. Okonkwo arrived at my parents' house 45 minutes after I called her. She walked in with the letter from the Law Society and the documentation from the capacity assessment, and she sat down at the kitchen table and told my brother, in front of the woman he'd brought with him, exactly what his legal position was. He said she had no right to be there. She said she had every right, and she invited him to consult his own lawyer. The woman he'd brought, I later found out she was a paralegal he'd hired from somewhere, looked at the documents Miss Okonkwo had brought, and then looked at my brother, and then quietly gathered her folders. My brother looked at my mother. She was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, holding a dish towel. She didn't look at him. She looked at the floor. He left. The formal legal process took several more months. I won't walk through every step because some of it is genuinely boring, filings and responses and waiting and more filings, and also because some of it is still technically ongoing, and Ms. Okonkwo has advised me about what I say publicly. What I can tell you is this. The unlicensed witness was found and cooperated with investigators, because when given the choice between implicating himself and implicating my brother, he made the obvious decision. The defamation claim Ms. Okonkwo filed was settled. My father's original trust, equal split as he'd always intended, was confirmed and protected under a formal guardianship arrangement that my mother and I share. My brother is contesting nothing. He has a lawyer now, a real one, and that lawyer has apparently advised him that his options are limited. I want to tell you about a moment that happened about 6 weeks after everything settled. I drove out to Oakville on a Sunday, just me and my daughter in the back seat, my husband staying home to catch up on sleep, and I sat in my parents' kitchen while my mother made tea and my father held my daughter in his armchair the way he used to hold me when I was small. He was having a good day. His eyes were clear. He looked at her for a long time without saying anything, and then he looked up at me. "You fought for this," he said. "I did," I said. He nodded, like that was the right answer, like he'd expected nothing less. My mother put a mug in front of me and sat down across the table, and for a while none of us said anything. The light came through the kitchen window the way it always does in the late afternoon in winter, low and golden, and my daughter made a small sound in my father's arms and he smiled down at her, and I thought, this is what he built and I am the reason it still exists. I don't say that with pride, exactly. I say it because it's true. Because someone had to hold the line, and I was the one standing there. The peace I have now is not the absence of my brother. It's the presence of what my father intended. A family where everyone gets what they were supposed to have. Where no one gets to rewrite the story just because they were standing closest to the pen. My daughter is asleep in the next room as I write this. She doesn't know any of it yet. Someday she'll be old enough to understand, and I'll tell her. When someone tries to take what isn't theirs, you document everything, you find the right people, and you do not back down, not once, not even when you're tired, especially when you're tired.